I'd like to introduce tonight Joe Leonard, a wonderful friend and collaborator. We've done lots of things together, and I just think the world of Joe. He's an incredibly talented carver. He's carved the outside row for the Disney Paris carousel, has two creatures on display in a museum exhibit called Mythical Creatures, which started at the Museum of Natural History in New York City and has traveled to 19 different museums around the world, soon to be 20. Joe will obviously tell you more about what he does and his accomplishments, but nonetheless, without further ado, here's tonight's presenter, Joe Leonard. And by the way, Joe said if you'd like to ask questions during the presentations, it's okay to chime in. To do so, press down your space bar, keep holding it down, ask the question, and then let the space bar go. And that should do it. Joe, here you go. And we will have a question and answer at the end as well. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right, wonderful. Thank you, Bob, Marie, and Justin, all you folks for putting this on. Thank you all for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. I want to just give us a little overview on what I've been up to or how things have gone. I've been carving for over 50 years, and I've been teaching carving workshops for over 20. Bob was actually one of my first students many, many moons ago. And I'm been very blessed to do what I'm able to do. I truly believe that. And I've got, excuse me, I have many other things I've worked on. I've been known in the carousel world for many years, but I've also done a lot of church work. I've done mythic creatures. I've done the carousel figures, statues, some restoration. We just finished a house facade last year in Cleveland Heights. It was carved in 1916. We'll have pictures of that later. And I've been able to have my work distributed or purchased in Japan, England, France, Canada, Singapore. We did a couple Lebanese monks. A friend of mine and I did them together. We shipped them to Beirut, Lebanon 4 years ago. And so my realm is a lot wider than just carousel animals. And I really am into the mythic creatures these days anymore. We have more to show on that. So we will touch on the Disneyland Paris carousel. We did, myself and some help, we did 17 large armored horses back in 1991. And then we'll show some things about the Mythic Creatures exhibit, which has been a marvelous exhibit. It's breaking records everywhere it goes. You'll see the Pegasus is 9 feet long, and his wings are 6'3", and then the Griffin that's in there is 6.5 feet tall. And we can get into more detail on that later. So with that, we're going to show some tape on carving process and honing chisels and so on. So I guess we can start a video at this point in time. Okay, usually when I get a potential commission, I do a drawing about this size, 8.5 by 11, for customer approval, and it's just pencil sketch, of course. And then from there, when I get approval, we do a grid on it. And then I bring that up to a pattern. This is a pattern of what I'm going to do. This is the actual size. The dragon's going to be have tucked wings. He's going to be in a diving position. He'll be about 6 feet long when he's done. So I go from the drawing to the pattern, and then from the pattern, do the glue ups. And this is the beginning of the dragon, and it's going to be a winter dragon with fur and no scales on it. So he's already got some of the fur started, and I've got a long way to go on him, obviously, but this is the beginning of him. This is one of my current commissions, and he's going to be okay. So after the pattern, draw it up on the wood and do a glue up pieces, parts, lamination. This is the beginning of the dragon. He'll be about 6 feet long when he's done. He'll be in a diving position, wings folded, and he'll be a painted piece, but he's a winter dragon with fur and no scales on him. That's as per the customer's request. You can see here how the laminations go, the glue ups. There's 4 different pieces glued up. The neck is partially hollow for expansion, contraction, and weight factor as well. So this is the current commission. I gotta get back and work on him. So This is a pattern of the Pegasus wing. I've created 4 Pegasus so far. They're from hoof to hoof 9 feet long. The wings are 6'3". So this shows the wing pattern for one of the creatures that I did. One of them is in San Francisco. One lives in the Cleveland area. One other one's in the museum exhibit currently in Denmark. And then the 4th one lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a private collection. Okay, the way we hone and resharpen or hone the chisels out is on this unit here. There's sandpaper, felt paper, leather, cloth, and then a couple of leather wheels here. And what this is doing is just buffing or setting the point back up. We're not grinding necessarily. And this turns 325 RPMs. So I have my students either use the leather or the cloth wheel, and all you're doing is just putting it on, you're kind of buffing it, but there's an abrasive on it, jeweler's rouge. That just sets the point back up again. It's like anything, a knife, use it, it gets duller and duller, then you put it on the wheel. During the day's time when they're carving, periodically come over and hit it on these wheels, and it makes a world of difference and how easy the chisel is to work with. The rule of thumb is the softer the wood, the sharper the tool. And these are Swiss made, they're very, very good chisels. I've got some chisels date back to 1832 that I still use. They're marvelous and really good metal. And these are good metal in them as well. But this is this you can use a strap, leather strap on a belt on a block of wood that'll work too. But this is quicker, and like I said, just a few minutes, boom, 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 you're ready to go. That's all it needs, it's back in action again. Simple as that. Okay, this is the carving bracket that we've designed for the carving workshops. And I built these benches from scratch. They're 36 by 16. The reason being you can work on 3 sides of the bench, and heights vary as well. So this bracket can fit in this bench. It can be clamped like so, or it can be screwed into the side of a leg of the bench. And then this comes off, and this is what my students start with. I rough out a head and neck on a reproducing carving machine, so it gives them something to begin with, otherwise it'd be kind of lost, I think. And then in doing so, this is the model that they can work from. This is a Muller military ghost horse. This is a resin casting off one of my originals. So they have this to measure and draw from, or feel and carve from. It gives them a really good reference. So the way that these work is you pull the head and neck off, and that gets mounted to this plate. Need my drill here. Got it. Okay, so this gets mounted to the plate like so. Right. Okay. And what's nice about these is they're very adjustable for working on these things. You have to stand on your head. So this piece goes back into the device, and it can be tightened down to whatever position. You can lay it down this way, you can lay it around, you can spin it 360 and lay it down. And what's good about this, it's got the hex shaped deal on it, and so it's ready to work on. They're very sturdy, and I sell a lot of these to my students. About 60% of my students take these home with them. We'll just do one next. And then for starters, Bert, did you want to jump in and do that? Grab a couple of chisels. Start with these two. Just do some little chips off. So I usually tell my students to start in, just start getting rid of the rough stuff. So I'll let Bert take over. Maybe that one or this one makes a difference. You just take small cuts. That's how we start them out. It's a 5-day workshop. Usually it's you can pretty much get most of it done in a week's time. That's if they didn't have these to start from, then maybe it'd be a much longer process. A lot of students come back and do the whole body of the horse. Some just do the head and the neck. I've been teaching these for 22 years, I think, something like that now. Okay, these are some of the horse plans I've come up with. This sheet is 3 by 4 feet. It's a little Indian pony I designed. And we offer the head and neck and the carving classes, 5-day workshops, and it runs 9 to 5. And this is one of the projects that we work on. And I sell these plans along with 20 reference photos. And the next one is the Muller Military Ghost Horse. So I have these 2 sets of plans. So this is a copy, one from Cedar Point. It's the famous Muller ghost horse that would supposed to be haunted and so on. And I did him or carved him full size for a collector up in Sandusky years ago. And then I did this half scale version. I have one in the gallery right now that's the original. And then I sell these drawings as well. There's this side and there's the back side, and shows the laminations on the body and the dowel positions. And I actually call out thicknesses on the legs so they have references to how thick this part should be, this part and this part. And the reference photos show a lot of detail for the final piece. I've had a lot of people purchase these plans and just mount them in their shops. And I'm in the current process of drawing it up full size. There's a couple of people requesting those, and I'm trying to get those done. I also do some, I'm putting up plans for a rocking carousel rabbit, sort of a Denzel style rabbit, which I've done probably close to 20 of those over the years. I believe we have a photograph of those coming up. So these are still available. I said there's 20 reference photos that come with it in color, which is really a nice reference. And if some folks come and do the workshop, head and neck, and then they take the bodies home with them and the legs if they want to try it, or they come back and take another workshop. I haven't promoted them as well as I should have, but we've gotten some pretty good activity, and I've had a lot of repeats. I have a gentleman from California that comes out twice a year. He's worked on the horses. He's worked on a Fantasia broom. He's working on Captain Jinx, which is a cigar store figure. So I laminated that up, scaled it down to 4 feet. So Ricardo's been working on that piece as well. So we do a variety of things in the workshops, but the carousel piece is, the head and neck's approximately a foot in size, and it's considered half scale. So the horse is 3 feet long by about 34 or so tall. And then the next, this is a finished carving version of it. This is the original that was painted by my better half. And one thing about the original ghost horse, if you look in the Painted Ponies book, I think it's on page 64, 65, I think. You look at the gun, the barrel of the gun is crooked to the gun, which nobody's ever noticed before. When I got involved in this thing, I noticed that. So I straightened one out on mine, but in the original carving, it's a little crooked, which is kind of an interesting point for what it's worth. But it's a neat horse. I mean, the body motion is nice. Muller was one of my faves as far as the designers and carvers went. And so I was given the opportunity to go to Cedar Point with their permission. And when the park was closed, I drove up the Midway. It was really kind of weird. It was abandoned. There was nobody around after season. So I'm by myself with one of the employees. We went back to the carousel, which is at that time was at the Frontier Carousel. I believe the carousel is in Dorney Park right now. I think it moved years ago. So I did measurements and drawings and photos and did an extensive study on this one, and also the armored horse that's on the Kittyland Carousel at Cedar Point. And then once upon a time, we had some fiberglass castings pulled. And one of the castings is on the Dorney Park, and then in Cedar Point on the Kittyland machine, one of my fiberglass armored horses is on that machine. And the two, I believe, are in their museum building at Cedar Point. And the Merry-Go-Round Museum in Sandusky purchased 2 of the big fiberglass pieces from years ago. So those, I believe, are still on display at the Merry-Go-Round Museum in Sandusky. And so this is one of my favorite horses. When I was at the postage stamp commemoration years ago, Louise Muller Rise was there, Daniel Muller's daughter, and I believe she was in her 80s at that time. And so I asked Marie about the ghost horse and the female figure riding her. She says, "Oh, that's my mom." So she still likes that horse. That was her favorite. So she comes back and rides it once in a while. There was rumors that the carousel would start up at night and all that, which is kind of neat. But anyhow, it was one of my favorite pieces. And from there, we will go on to some of my other project. This is a copy of a Denzel
This is
Rooster.
another current project in the shop. It's a copy of a Denzel carousel rooster. This is the second one. Excuse me, this is the second one that we've done, or I've done, and he's getting real close to finish. The first one I did years ago, I was at a carousel convention on the Queen Mary, and there was a question as to what happens with that bird down the road and somebody tries to sell it as an original and not a reproduction carving. And I hide 3 nails in a pyramid shape inside the body, so that if they have any question as to what it is, all I have to do is x-ray it and it'll show that it's not an old piece. There's only 8 of these originals in existence, I'm told. So this one's coming along nicely. It goes to a private collector, ended up in North Dakota, I believe. And a lot of detail in the feathers. It's taken forever, unfortunately. But he's pretty neat bird.
And the reason for this is, like I said, the second one that I've done. And when I was on the Queen Mary, they questioned it. And years ago, there was someone who designed and made a chair. I forget what the period was, very, very early. And he finished it just like the old originals. And he sold it to an antique dealer who knew what he was buying, and he misrepresented it to the Ford Museum, sold it to the Ford Museum for 300 grand, I think it was. And this guy called the museum and said, "You have a fake chair." And they were adamant about it. And he says, "Look and have it x-rayed, and such leg, there's a pin, a metal pin, and in this leg, there's a metal pin, because I did this piece." So they did that, and they found that they got snookered. And I'm sure they went after the dealer accordingly. So I've kind of protected myself, and not that I do a lot of copies. This is one of the very few. Most of the pieces I've done a design for individual, one of a kind, especially for my customers. Second rooster, I did of course, a military horse as per request and with Cedar Point's permission. I did a PTC Indian pony that Rusty Donahue used to have that one for sale, and the guy wanted a copy of that. So I did that one. That's been a long, long time ago. But my first convention was 1980 in Madison, Wisconsin, which was interesting. And I started doing a lot of restoration work at that time. We still do some restoration work, but mostly, newer pieces, and most of my work is commissioned.
Okay, this is what we refer to as an Avatar-inspired carousel giraffe. The collector calls it a winraff. It's a Nordic creature and almost ready for painting. I did the head and neck some time ago in a different mode with vines and flowers, and she decided that we needed something with chains and armor because of being Nordic. So I started over again. In the meantime, fortunately, the other head and neck was in the gallery, and that sold to another collector customer down in Alabama. So this piece is 7.5 feet tall, and it's going to be painted white with blue spots, and then snowflake dapples on his rump, apparently. And he's, like I said, almost ready for paint. We got a few more details to do on him, and he's a huge critter. His head and neck still come off, but that's going to be permanently mounted shortly. So we'll pan in and take a closer look at him. The eyes are kind of neat. Those are, I'll let people guess what kind of eyes those are. We get them from a taxidermy supply house, obviously. But the chain still comes off for painting purposes. But it's not out of one piece like a lot of people ask. It's multiples. So it's easier and quicker and faster and cleaner to do it that way. It's been quite a project and quite an imagination to do this thing. But he's, like I said, the little dragon on the side there's almost done. He still has some rough spots yet. Okay, this is the front of the animal, of course, and then I wanted to show the chest shield on the front with the dragon's head and the fleur-de-lis. It's kind of a nice extra touch, I think, nice detail. Okay, this is what we refer to as a mega carousel horse. This horse is 7 feet tall, life size, as per the collector's request. I designed it a few years back, and we carved it. Liz did the painting on them. A lot of the flowers are attached, and just like we did on, this is basically the same size of the Disney horses that we did years ago back in 1991. This one, the head and the neck are detachable because you can't get him through a door. He goes over 200 pounds. And this collar up here, this is out of epoxy sculpt. And some of these have a screw behind them, so they screw into the body, front, back, and side. And that hides the seam from the neck to the body, which worked out excessively well because you couldn't really warp wood to make that work. So he's waiting to be delivered. And he goes to New Jersey when it's ready, or when we get him going here. And very detailed, as you can see. It was sort of an offshoot of an Ilian's flowered horse, but not quite. It's sort of my own concoction, obviously. I don't copy anything anymore other than that rooster, but most of the pieces I do are custom designed as per customer's request, or especially designed for them. Most of them are one of a kind. And this one certainly is. Okay, this is an early 1900s Ilian's horse that we restored. My partner in crime, Liz, painted it. We didn't have too much restoration work to do on it from the wood standpoint. And she's a marvelous painter and has painted a lot of animals and horses for us. So he came in from a collector, part of a collection that we sold that's going to end up in North Dakota as well. So this is the final product. You can see the detailing on the bridle, and then down on the body and everything. So I think she did a marvelous job on it with some glazes, and has excellent color choice. We've done a lot of restoration over the years. I started out doing restoration work back in the 80s, I think it was, and I started making some of my own as people requested, new animals when they couldn't find certain old ones. And so we're still doing some restoration, still making new critters, but he's a beauty. We're going to show a few more pieces. This was one of 2 commissions as a result of the Mythic Creatures exhibit. This is what I call a life-size unicorn, approximately the size of a deer or a little smaller as per mythology, like the French tapestries and so on. We did a lot of research on this. This is in a home in Ohio, and we had the apple blossoms on them and the flowers and vines through the mane, and then in the beginning of the base, there's some flowers on that because it was sitting up on a ledge, so you could see the flowers on the base from that, the crazy tail and so on. And this is a second unicorn that I had done, and really fond of this piece. I thought it came out well. It was a lot of fun doing this one. And then there was another one that I had done, had carved for, this one lives in New Jersey, and this was Chester, the unicorn of all things. Well, this young lady has a whole series of horses, does a lot of horse shows and stuff. She had one horse, Chester, with the Roman nose. So we put a Roman nose on this one, and he's about 5 feet in length, and he's in the process of trying to get up, obviously, and didn't want any flowers, so we just did the vines and the flowers, or the leaves on him, and then mounted him permanently to the oak base. And that was an interesting piece as well. He's a little bit larger than the other one, but still, I think, more of a unicorn size. There's one in the museum exhibit, the traveling museum exhibit, Mythic Creatures. It's the size of a quarter horse with a narwhal horn on it. I think, I just don't know what they were thinking, but I mean, it's nice, but it's a huge, huge thing. So at any rate, that was the second unicorn. And from there, we went on to, this is a stylized dragon out of mahogany. I've done a number of these. They're kind of fun to do. They're about 18, 20 inches, 16 inches in height, and you glue up the wood. You can see the line and the lamination on him, where when you glue up different pieces, you're never quite sure what's going to come out. So when you're carving it, sometimes
there was one that I had done that the grain flared just like feathers. It was really crazy. And these are, like I said, they're simple. Well, they're not exactly simple, but they're stylized and they're polished, and it's a whole different ball game on doing something like this than coated naturally with a satin urethane. Usually seal them with a wax-free shellac, which is a universal sealer. So you can either, paint over the top or prime over the top, or do a satin urethane thing over the top, and then they're hand rubbed out as well. That's one of several that I've been able to complete. Now, this was a 50th anniversary horse. It's obviously an offshoot of the Ilian's flowered horse, but my take on the Ilian's flowered horse, it's on I believe that's one on the cover of the Painted Ponies book, published by Bill Mann. If you take the flowers off of that horse, it doesn't have much of any movement or motion. It's kind of a plain, horse. There's no whatever to it. So I did a crazy mane and tail on this one, and a gentleman come into the shop and was a friend of a friend, and he wanted something for his wife for their 50th wedding anniversary. He wanted something unique, so I did a drawing of this, and they went for it, and they had a big, hoopla party about the whole thing, which was great. Well, they both have passed not too long ago, so this horse came back to me. I think it's been 2 or 3 years ago now, and I had it in the gallery, which we'll show the gallery later on. And one of my customers from Alabama came through and made an offer on it, so it lives in Alabama now, and I went to a really nice home. It was a neat piece to do, very complex piece, and the flowers are kind of similar to the mega horse that we showed earlier, but again, it's sort of an offshoot of the Ilians, but my own flavor to it, and it doesn't have the Ilians look to the face and stuff. I don't think. Sort of has my own concoction, whatever. But a neat piece, though. It was a nice piece to do. I did another Ilians or flowered horse like that too, with not quite as mane tail. This was a horse called Indiana. It was purchased by a collector in Indiana. It's supposed to have the endangered species of Indiana on it. It's about 5.5, 6 feet long. It's got the gray hair, and there's a blue racer snake going through the mane, and spotted turtle. This is, of course, is the unpainted version. The next slide shows the close-up on the body and has the painted version of this. So now you can see the blue racer snake. There's acorns and oak leaves and the blue heron and the blue Carner butterflies and the spotted turtle. And on the back, there's a brown bat, and I forgot what else is on the back side, but that was kind of a neat piece to do too. It was another fun one to design and try to figure out, and particularly getting the snake going through the mane. That was kind of an interesting project as well. And this is the last rocking rabbit that I had done. This is sort of a version of the flirting Denzel rabbit, my concoction of it. The other ones aren't quite like this, but they're all different. They hold an adult as well as a child. This one's out of mahogany. I've done a couple out of walnut, and they're heirloom pieces, I think. And I mean, I've had them, people that have bought them from me that don't have kids, and they ride them themselves. They're very therapeutic, actually. And this one lives up on Put-in Bay. A good friend named George Stoiber purchased it for his 2-year-old granddaughter. I think it's been 2 or 3 years ago now. And the first one I did was for a designer's hope house in Lakewood, Ohio. Each designer was doing a different room in this mansion for a benefit of the Cancer Society. And so I did the rabbit for that. And I got a call from somebody at the show saying, boy, these women are riding this rabbit. They're going to break it. You got to get down here. And I thought, let them test it out. So it survived the test, and I've done quite a few since then. So they're neat. Let the fur detail carry it, and very little detail on the trappings and the saddle, and of course put the glass eyes in, kind of bring them to life. Now I also have gotten into not a lot, but a fair amount of church work over the years. I attend the St. Ambrose Catholic Church in Garrettsville, and 2 years ago, I was approached by one of the worship committee about doing something with our baptismal font. It was very plain, needed something. They said, can you do a descending dove for this? And I go, well, I could do something, sure. So I went and looked at it, and it was 30 some years old, and some of the veneers are peeling, and it was just not in very good shape. So I just heck with it. So I did my own version of it, used the old, the glass top on the bowl, and I put this one on wheels. So it has 4 symbols of birth, the urn and the fire and the cross and descending dove and so on. So that was the first thing I did. I donated that to the church. And then after that, I said, well, we need a lectern to go with that thing. So to the left of the screen is a lectern. And a couple ladies in the choir says, well, if you're going to do that, you need to make that thing lower because it's too tall for us. We're too fine. Come and show me what you want. So they came up to the gallery, and when I had it partially done, I lowered it down, so it was perfect for them. And the Catholic Church there's 5 seasons of the church, Lent, Christmas, Advent, Easter, and so on. So each one of the symbols, there's 5 interchangeable symbols on that. So the one that's hard to see in this one, but it's the Easter symbol with the cross and the lilies. There's a star for Christmas. There's 2 fish for Lent. And so they're interchangeable in accordance to the seasons. Well, we need an altar to go with that. So I did the altar, and again, the lamb is a little hard to see, but there's a lamb in the middle of the altar. And I did that for the existing altar, which was not doing well either. There was a lot of problems with it. So I made the new one, added that piece to it. And then I got that completed, and everybody loved it. And I thought, well, we need a priest chair to go with that. So I did the priest chair. I've revamped it a little bit since then. It's in the back there, but I told Father Ed, you may have to say a few extra blessings on that one, because there was some serious shucky darn said when I built that sucker. But it turned out well. And then I revamped the candle holders and a few other things I did there. So it was all donated to them, and it was a calling. It needed to be done. I was happy to do it. And it took about 3 or 4 months to go through this and get them done, but they're very, very well received. It made a whole different appearance on the church. So it was very rewarding. One of the most rewarding projects I've ever worked on, I must say. And this piece was a newel post for some folks locally. He's a real estate agent, and they had seen a picture in a magazine. Some of you, maybe Bobby, you've probably seen it, was a horse sort of standing upright. It was a European or imported piece, and they wanted something like that. And the thing about it was that they didn't have room for it. So I designed this piece for them, and I made the newel post, and I had to glue everything up, make that, and then the main goes up the railing, the banister railing for them, and it's, I don't know if you can see it on the photo or not, but the railing is a lighter color than the main, so it's a 2-tone deal. And he was very kind. I talked to him not too long ago. This was done several years ago, and he said, this is the best thing that we have in our house, and they have some nice things in our house. And so that was a neat piece to do. I've done a few other newel posts, but this was probably the neatest one that I've been able to work on. And then I got a call from a gentleman. I teach at woodcraft stores, mostly in the Cleveland area anymore. And they referred to me through woodcraft, but he said he was looking for a house. This is in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, on the east side of Cleveland. He was looking for a house with a street presence, a ballroom, and move-in condition. So they found this house, and they said 2 years later, and $1 million they moved in. Well, the front facade was all wore down. It's out of yellow pine, and you couldn't hardly tell what was there on the 2 vertical sides. It was really wore out. You couldn't tell what was there. And then so we took a bunch of photos, used some filters, and kind of determined what might have been there. So I redesigned and redefined everything. So we spent several months out there working on this piece, and we finished it last September. And a pretty neat guy. He was a pilot during the Vietnam era, flying bird dogs and F-4s and F-86s and so on. So we had a lot of aviation talks, but regardless, after it was all pretty much said and done and coded, he come out and he just said, wow, which was great. So it was nice to hear. He was a really cool guy. And this faces to the south. So there's a product that, well, we used a General Finishes stain on it, Java. And to coat it, there's a product called Exterior 450, which is a water base, but it holds up exterior outdoors very, very well. So Mike Novak, who was used to own some woodcraft stores, he and another friend of mine, Bert Stover, worked with me on this project. We ended up using scaffolding and so on, but after several months, we got it done. We coated it, and he says, well, how do we maintain this? And I think Mike told him to call us in 4 years. So it's really a good product, and it worked out well, and he was pleased. And we had to do it on location, and we thought about taking it apart, and we just would have damaged it terribly. So we went out there. It's about an hour from my shop, but we went out and 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at a time, and it worked out nice. It was a neat project, very frustrating at times because we spent more time studying and trying to figure out what was supposed to be done, and then the carving process as well. So it was very rewarding in the end. It was a good one. This is a Disneyland Paris carousel. A lot of people ask, how did you get a hold of this deal? Well, Bill Mann, who wrote the Painted Ponies Carousel book, used to do the IAPA show in Orlando, and Disney reps approached him at that show. It's about amusement parks, rides all over the world. I want to know if anybody knew anybody could carve horses for him for this project in Paris. Well, he referred me and several others, I believe. And so I got a call from Disney. He told me they were going to call. So they called and asked about stuff. I sent them pictures and they sent a rep out. One of the designers, Tom Morris, came out. We spent the day together, went up through Amish territory and, whatever. And so we talked about the project, and they said they wanted the horses huge, this size, which was, they were like 7 feet by 6.5 feet. They ended up weighing 250 pounds a piece. And so I had to do a test horse. Disney was in partnership with the French government. And as per their agreement, the French were supposed to do 50% of the work done in the park. So we did a test horse. I designed and did a test horse. And then there's another, they found a carver in France somewhere that did a test horse. His horse was very, very nice, but it was kind of wide and fat as per normal horses. And it wasn't carousel savvy because it was too wide. Most of the animals are only 11, 12 inches wide at the widest. So we did the test horse. Well, first of all, I bid the job. And then a year and a half later, I bid the job again. Then we did the test horse. And then we finally landed the project. And I had 4 people who were working with me full time to get this done. There's no way I could have done this by myself. Again, these horses were massive, and they're built as the old horses were, hollow inside, and the legs were out of poplar. The rest of them were basswood. This is a lead horse, the finished last horse that we did. We did this horse. I don't know how we did it. 18 days and nights. We cranked this bugger out, and I was on a deteriorating bonus deadline of $700 a day. So we missed the deadline by 3 days. And Val Usley, who was a rep at or a project manager from California, flew out to Ohio at 6 o'clock, come out and visit us. Weren't ready for him. He says, call me at the hotel. I'm on California time. I don't care. So I called him at 10 o'clock. He come out at 11:30. We stood this horse up 2 minutes to midnight on September 24th, 91. And he bought it off at that time. So those 2 minutes saved me $700. But they were brutal. They were tough. The designer people the artists were fun to work with. The money people were exactly that, money people. And he said it was in the contract, whatever. So we did fine tune it for almost another week before we shipped it out. But we shipped them to Florida, ready to paint. They painted them, and they had a crew of about 14 or 15 people in Florida painting these things, mostly with acrylics, and then shipped them overseas from there. So this was the last one, and we've got pictures of several other ones. This was a dragon shield horse on the side. At that time, we were using fax machines. I would fax a drawing to Paris, I'd fax a drawing to Florida, one to California, and they would get together and buy off the design, and then we'd start on it. We worked on 2, 3, 4 at a time. And then as they approve this one, we'd get down to the next one. We can do the next slide, if you would. And this is a Mace ball horse. This is one of my favorite ones. And then when I'd get a horse done, I'd have to shoot videos of it. So I'd send a video to Paris, I'd send a video to California, one to Florida, depending upon where the designers were, and they'd get together and buy it off, and then we'd again continue on. So total, we did 16 on the carousel and 1 spare. And the next one is this is the salamander horse. This is the salamanders, the royal emblem of Francois the First, I think it was. They sent me that. I thought it was butt ugly, but it actually turned out pretty neat. So then again, I designed these pieces, and we had to tuck the legs up to where they would clear the platform and what have you. And this is the Queen's chariot horse, and the chariot behind it, there's 2 chariots on this machine, and I believe they came from the Orlando machine that they were never used. They were in storage for years. They revamped them and shipped them over to the Paris carousel. And then this one is the eagle winged chest, we call it the chest eagle winged horse, I guess I called it. And they tried to do a color wheel scheme on this where they would rotate through the color wheel, which I don't think anybody picked up on it. But the 4 outside rows the outside row horses were mine, and the 4 inside rows are fiberglass castings off the Orlando machine. They did casting of 4 horses on each row, and then did multiple castings of those and painted them different to make them look different. And then the next piece is a sort of a draped horse, I guess we called him. And again, it has a closed mouth on it. I think we did 3 or 4 with a closed mouth on them. And one thing we did do on some of the armor on sort of on the backside, we did the subliminal Mickeys, the 3 circles. And I told him about that, and the designer went through the roof on it. He says, "Oh, please tell me you didn't do this." And I said, "Well, we did on 4 or 5 horses." And then when the press releases came out for the Disney thing, look for the subliminal Mickeys on the horses. So I guess it was okay. Now this is a dragon horse. He's another chariot horse, obviously, and one of my favorites as well. I don't know, it just jived. I mean, I didn't design these all at one time because we had to go through books of heraldry and pictures of dragons, and they sent me a bunch of photos from the Museum des Armies over in Paris, and anywhere I could find reference, we would go, and most everything I designed, they went with. Even the last horse, I questioned the design on it, and they it's good to go. And this is the round shield horse. And the drapers, we were really proud of the way the drapery worked on these. And I did have to go to Florida twice. There was a couple of times I had to remove a little bit of the drapery because of the foot pegs wouldn't clear the piece. And so it was interesting. I mean, I was sad. I was 10 degrees up here and 75 in Florida. So you had a 7 o'clock flight in the morning, 7 o'clock flight back at night. So from 10 degrees to 75 to 10, that wasn't fun, but their insistence. This was one, it's got the griffins on the side and the 2 shields, or the 2 sections with the saber on it. And we did a lot of texturing on these with different tools. And I know Marianne Stevens was a carousel guru from New Mexico, a lovely, lovely lady. She called me one day and says, "On the texture on these animals, is that a secret? How did you do that?" And I said, "No, it's no secret. We did rounded off spike and tapped and made them accordingly." But if any of you have seen the old carousel horses with the armor, it's like a zigzag pattern on them. And it's like, man, this must have taken forever. Well, I was working on a project one day, and I held the chisel and I just started rocking it back and forth. It was a gouge. And it's like, holy crap, that's how they did that. In just seconds, they could do the whole, or minutes, they could do the whole side in armor, and look like armor. It was mock armor, if you will, but it was a real simplified, fast way to do things. That's one of the few secrets that came about or was never documented. So it's kind of a neat thing to discover, I guess. Now, this is the fleur-de-lis horse. Obviously, there's fleur-de-lis all over the side of them. And again, a closed mouth piece, or closed mouth horse. And some of these, like this one, the Disney changed the tail on it and tucked it in because it was too long with the legs extended in the front. So I'm not crazy about that tail, but they did do some modifications on a couple of them. I think only 2 or 3 maybe, just for a space savings issue, I guess. And then the next one is, now I was told you don't do any Mickeys, you don't do anything on those horses, which, okay, fine. And this is sort of the clover horse. I never said anything, but if you turn this horse upside down, all those clovers are Mickey heads on it. And I've never been challenged on that one. So I was like, sorry guys, but there it is. And I maybe they'll find out now. I don't know, but here's what it is. So anyhow. And that was one of the few the mane came through the armor. Now this was, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dean Beeman. He was a PGA commissioner for years. I had my shop in Ohio City on the west side of Cleveland years ago, and Dean and Judy came into the shop, and I'm not a golfer. I had no idea who this guy was. And so we're at the PGA Tour. We heard about your work and through the antique dealers. So they commissioned this horse and they commissioned the lion. The lion didn't materialize because I told them at the beginning, I had a potential Disney project brewing. If that happens, everything gets put on the back burner, which it did. So this was one of the first ones we did after the Disney horses. And it either lives in Palm Springs or I'm not sure, California or Florida somewhere. Their folks are still, I've lost touch with them. We used to stay in touch, but he was the PGA commissioner. And at that time he could fire Arnold Palmer if he wanted to. I was like, oh, okay. I'm not a golfer. So anyway, that was a fun horse to do as well. Lots and lots of detail. This horse was for a collector in Kansas. He came through during the Disney project. This is the same size and style as the Disney horses, 7 feet long, 6.5 tall, 250 pounds. So we created this one specifically for him with the lion, jester head on this scepter on the side, and the eagle or the griffin shield on the front. And the plumes are always kind of nice to do. We had a lot of texture in there, which is again hard to see in this photo. The tail kind of overlaps the band on the tail, which is kind of neat. And then the next one was actually another horse we did for a collector in Texas, same size and style as Disney. And it came back to me. They were downsizing. So this one now lives at the IX Center in the Cleveland area. It's a big expo center. Well, I talked to the reps at Disney about this horse, saying, hey, this could be another spare for the Disney machine in Paris because it's the same deal. And they hem-hawed for 3 or 4 months. And I had met Mr. Park, who owned the IX Center at the time, and I had a picture of the horse, and I did a rough drawing of the facade. So he ended up buying it. So we created this big facade. It's 10 feet across and I think 12 feet tall, something like that. And we had a metal frame made up for it. So it was in the IX Center. People could get up and get their picture taken. So it's a photo op thing, which went to a nice home. I believe it's, as far as I know, it's still there. And this piece went to Sausalito, I think it was California. It's one of the few, again, with the mane coming through the armor. And it was, again, especially designed for these folks, as most of my pieces are. Another neat piece. I like the color scheme on him as well. Or on it. Now, I've been involved. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the Mythic Creatures exhibit that was originated by the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, which this picture is about. I'd gotten a call out of the blue one day from Joel Swamler, I think his name was, from the museum, saying they were doing this exhibit called Mythic Creatures. They saw my griffin in a book called Painted Ponies, done by Bill Mann, and wanted to know if I had one available. They're creating this exhibit, and I had a fiberglass available. I sent him a picture of it. But in the meantime, I talked to Mr. Yorberg here, and I said, what can you tell me about the Mythic or the Museum of Natural History in New York City? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, they got this exhibit and they want my griffin and whatever. And he says, duh, it doesn't get any better than this. You want in on this. So I ended up talking to him. I said, yeah, you can have the griffin, but if you like that, you might really like the Pegasus. And he says, well, we're not going to use a Pegasus. I said, well, okay, here's my website. So they looked on the site and they spotted the armored Pegasus that I had done. And they called me back 2 days later, says, we want it. So this is a picture in the gallery of him. He's, again, 9 feet long, his wings are 6'3". And how the armored one originated, I had a gentleman in the Ohio, Cleveland area. He liked the armored horses we did. And he liked the first Pegasus I had done, which had no armor on it. It was just a bare bones Pegasus, which lives in Hillsborough, California, up in the San Francisco area. So I said, well, it looked kind of dumb hanging an armored horse on the wall. But as we're talking on the phone, I said, what about an armored Pegasus? And he goes, what would that look like? I said, no clue. I just thought of it. So I designed it. I don't know if you're familiar with Boris Vallejo's work. He's sort of a guru in fantasy art. So I did sort of Boris Vallejo, Leonard, Art Nouveau armor. It had to be light, airy armor to make it work, because the horses on Disney were very massive and heavy, you know, robust, whatever. And this stuff had to be a different deal. So this was a design I came up with. So the collector that owned it loaned it to the exhibit for New York and Chicago, and then pulled it out. We did another one. It took us, I think, 9 months, and we shipped that one to Sydney, Australia. And that's one that's still in the exhibit. And then I did another one for a collector in Fort Wayne, Indiana, about the same size. And this is the armored Pegasus. He's in a traveling museum exhibit called Mythic Creatures, along with a 6.5 foot tall griffin. Pegasus is 9 feet long from hoof to hoof. His wings are 6'3". The wings attach right about in here. And he's been in 19 museums around the world. They're currently in Holstebro, Denmark, and headed to Aarhus, Denmark next month, I believe. And the Museum of Natural History in New York City originated this exhibit, and they called me out of the blue one day. Saw my griffin in a book called Painted Ponies about carousel horses and animals, and I loaned them a resin casting of that 6.5 feet tall. And then I told them about the Pegasus. Said, we're not going to use a Pegasus. I said, well, here's my website. It was JoeLeonard.com, and they looked on it and called me 2 days later and said, we want it. So now they've got a griffin, or the Pegasus, in the exhibit, and he's been, like I said, 19 museums, and been to Australia, and now in Denmark and Canada, all over the US. It's a huge exhibit. They're bringing record crowds.
And then doing the exhibit, they published a book on the exhibit, which is again from the museum. And I'm in the book, which is nice. It's a honor. Here's the Pegasus. And again, he's 9 foot and his wings are 6'3". And then the Griffin is also in there. The Griffin is 6.5 feet tall. And he's a resin casting, cast off my original carving from years ago. And the exhibit's been running since '07, I believe.
Okay.
And this was a smaller version of the Griffin. This is out of mahogany. He was about 30 inches tall, I believe, and he lives in San Diego now. And he was inspired by the big Griffin that I did for the exhibit, or for this other collector in San Francisco, actually. And so I've done a few other smaller versions. This is the big fiberglass version of the Griffin that's got an incorrect tail on this one. I changed it and the tail wraps around the side of the leg with as per the ones in the exhibit. So Pegasus has its own crate, the wings have a crate, the base has a crate, Griffin has a crate, and the Griffin's base is 4 feet tall. It's not this base, but no, it's 4 feet tall in the exhibit. So it's 5 crates that my pieces are in, and everything's handled and transported and cared for by the museum folks. And so they're, like I said, still on the road. They've been, well, soon will be 20 museums. And of course, there's Pegasus again. This is at one of the museums. They had this nice, each one's different. One of them had these cotton clouds above them, which was neat. And then they had the blue lighting, and it's really kind of neat how they did that. But every museum seems to set it up differently. We've been to New York opening, the Cleveland opening, Cosi and Columbus opening. I went to Field Museum in Chicago to do a minor repair on one of the wings. Got damaged in shipping, nothing major, just simple fix. And these are in the gallery, or my shop. The gallery just gave you an idea of how the size, but again, the Griffin's on a 4 foot base, so he's much taller. He's like 9.5 feet tall. Now I've got our gallery is called JoeLeonard Gallery and Vintage Emporium. Liz and I have this place together, and we have 35, 36 artists represented. We've had the gallery for 6.5 years. There's a property just up the road from where my shop's at, and a friend of mine made a deal on it with me, which worked out excessively well. So Liz does a lot of pet portraits and paintings, and so we needed a place for her work. We needed a place for mine. I only do a couple art shows a year, and some of the sizable stuff I have is tough to transport. So we got the gallery together with 7 artists originally, and 6.5 years later, we're up to 35 or 36. And I built an addition onto it a year and a half ago, which is our new classroom where we teach stained glass and carving classes, and also more gallery space. So this is sort of a video tour of the gallery as it is now. Okay, this is the JoeLeonard Gallery and Vintage Emporium. We have our own work in here. We have 35 or 6 other artists' works represented in the gallery. Spoonbill is from a gentleman who has done a lot of work with us. And we have different artists for different things. We've got quite a huge selection, some antiquities, and a lot of it's original, most of it's original art. And we did a series of wizard wands for some of the shows. I've got more of those, but those have gone pretty well for the Harry Potter fans. And we want other pieces. This is a little carousel rabbit. I think he's a Mexican piece. I'm not really sure. I acquired him through a collection, and debating whether we're going to put him on rockers or not. He'd be kind of a neat little rocking critter. I've made a series of rocking rabbits over the years, but those are my carvings, not this one. Then I've got into some stylized pieces. This dragon is out of mahogany. It's a stylized carving I did some years ago, a couple years ago, I guess. And then over to the more wizard wands, and then the carved grouse is an outstanding piece. That was for a gentleman who's passed on. We're helping liquidate his estate. And it's just detailing on that's unbelievable. And then we get into lots of other things. This is a little bronze piece that I had done on one of my carvings. So carving was out of mahogany. I call it horse feathers, and that's kind of a southwestern piece. So we had some bronzes pulled on that, which were pretty neat.
And then over on the other side, there's a carousel or a giraffe that I worked on. I've done a few of those. And that one is still currently available in the gallery. And then down here we have a bunch of wood boxes. There's a family in Pennsylvania that make those up for us. And a lot of them have hidden drawers in them. They're really kind of neat. They're great for holiday gifts and what have you. We have a lot of unusual things in here because I do a pretty good holiday business in the gallery. And this is an old Illian's horse, early 1900s again. It needs minor restoration on him. He's going to live up in North Dakota eventually. And then we have fused glass and blown glass and some other items. This is probably one of the neatest things here is this turkey walking stick with a turkey head. That thing's outstanding. Beautiful detailing on that piece. We just got that in. And then the cutting boards, of course. We've got some driftwood stuff. So we have a huge variety in here. We've got, like I said, 30 some artists. We're very selective on what we bring in here. Pottery. In that area, there's some Josephina glass from Poland up at the top there. That's pretty neat stuff. We have a couple artists that do metal work for us. We've got stainless and copper, and these pieces of yard art basically is what they are, I guess. And then down below here is the otter table that I did some time ago. The otters are made out of walnut. The tabletop is maple and the legs are mahogany. I did a horse table with horse swimming through the water. I did a dragon table with dragons going through the water. And this one's the one I have left as of now. A lot of interest in it, a lot of oohs and ahs. And then more of our pottery, different artists over here as well. And this is one of Liz's paintings of the Indian spa. Beautiful piece. She does a lot of pet portraits as well. We'll show those in a little bit here. Again, more pottery. And then this gentleman does segmented bowls. This one spells out Ohio, which is pretty neat. He's a retired postal worker, actually. And we have the little military horse over here. That's a copy went from Cedar Point. I did it full size, and that's half scale. That's the original. And we'll show the plans for that one. I sell the carving plans as well, so that's of that horse, another one. And that one up there is a resin casting off of the military horse. That one's going to live in Canada pretty soon. And a lot more items, some more pottery. This pottery here is Jane Waxenfelder. She's out of Pennsylvania, does some marvelous work. Her glazes are really neat. And over here, we've got some scroll pieces here on the wall. This is a gentleman out of Wellington. Those are all hand cut. They're not, there's no laser work here. It's all scroll cut on a scroll saw. Okay, these are some of the pet portraits by Liz, my partner in crime in the gallery. And she works from photographs and has done a lot of dogs, cats, horses, and a lot of critters. And various sizes, of course. I think a medium is pretty much for acrylics, but very nicely done, obviously. And this one's, that was my shop cat Scooter. This is Walter. He's our three-legged Maine Coon that strayed in about 5-6 years ago. So he kind of adopted us. He has his rear right leg missing surgically, I was told. And then over here is another one of our portraits, German Shepherd on slate. And well, this is my version of the Fantasia broom from Sorcerer's Apprentice. He's 5 feet tall. And I take him to shows and put my business cards in his hand. The kids love to take business cards from him. And we've had him for a while, but he's a little beat up from shows and stuff, but he's a good conversation piece, and a lot of kids like to stand next to him, hook their arm on him, get their pictures taken with him. It's just kind of a fun thing, but I had to put the sign on here because younger generation, everybody's into Harry Potter and Beauty and the Beast, but that's not what it is. So anyhow, kind of a fun thing to do. Okay, well, that's pretty much ends our gallery tour and I guess our presentation. If anyone has any questions, I guess we can go there. Be happy to answer them if I can.
By the way, I'd like to say thank you, Joe, for a wonderful tour and presentation. That was really special. And
Oh, thank you.
thank you for sharing.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Appreciate it. It was a fun thing to do. It was something different for me, but we're always looking for different things. So it was a neat thing to do, and I appreciate you getting me involved in this.
Any questions?
I have a question about you band organ rally.
Wait.
Sorry,
I'm
can you
sorry.
repeat the question?
Sure.
Louder.
I have a question about the Utica band organ rally that you mentioned. So here it is. How many band organs do you think there are gonna be?
I think there'll be 100,
Well,
but the reality is, if we get 20, that would be great. So
Listen.
can I ask my
Shh.
can we ask our friend if he would like to bring her down to the band organ rally this year?
Well, if we see him at the end of the month, we can ask if he'll bring it. Maybe we'll see.
If
I don't know if he
brings
will.
her.
Yep, we'll see. Okay, thank
well,
you.
that would be fun. We would certainly appreciate you asking anyone. The more people we get, the more fun it is. So,
Mhm.
Great.
you know.
I have a question calling from California.
Mhm.
What kind of wood do you use to make your carousel horses? My father-in-law used to carve carousel horses in Red Bluff. It was called the Carousel Corner, and he made carousel horses out of basswood. And I wondered what kind of wood you use.
We do use basswood. We've done some in poplar, mostly basswood. The Disney horses had legs made of poplar because it was more structurally more sound in case they were set them on the legs. But yeah, basswood's definitely the choice. I did one horse for Sedona, Arizona that was out of poplar because he wanted a lighter colored wood, didn't want it painted. And then like the Rocking Rabbits are out of mahogany or walnut because that's a little bit different situation where they're more of a, not a child's thing, but they're smaller scale. So then we use what they call the coffin method. They're hollow inside, the bodies are hollow, necks are hollow. And it's for expansion, contraction, and also a weight factor involved in them. There was a gentleman out in California years ago, he used to carve them out of redwood. It was a Spanish guy. I met him at shows. I can't remember his name now, but he did some really neat pieces out of cedar. I think it was cedar he used. And I wish I could remember his name, but he used to be at some of the carousel conventions years ago.
Yes, my father-in-law used to put a time capsule inside of the horses, and it contained things that maybe about 100 years will be found, like a newspaper and maybe a cursive writing, letter containing cursive writing, which may go out of style. I don't even think they're teaching that anymore.
Yeah, really.
And also some things that are of our era. So in maybe 100 years when the glue wears out and things come out, then people will be able to look back at our era and see how we lived.
Yeah, that's kind of neat because I sign them on the inside in pencil and date them, and then I sign on the bellies of the horse. I carve in the name and the date that we did them. As some of that was per Disney's request, but all the horses I do or any of the animals I do are signed. I think that's an important thing, and dated, of course. And in restoring, we found some neat things inside the horses. There was one from England. I made him into a centaur, and it was 3 or 4 sixpence coins in them from 40s, 50s, and 30s. We found partial tickets in some of them, and some other coins. They stick it down beside the pole hole or whatever. So, and we found newspaper. I think it was Great Tuttle years ago. Found a newspaper clipping inside of a lion's head. They're working on it. It was supposed to have been one of Daniel Muller's carvings, but the paper dated him at 10 years old when that lion was made. So who knows? Who knows? You know, it's hard to say.
Right. Thank
But
you.
thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's
You're
neat.
welcome. He was quite a carver.
I'm thinking, yes, absolutely.
So there was a question about sources for wood.
Depending upon what part of the country they're from, I get them locally up here at different hardwood lumber companies, and I buy basswood. And there was a company called Appalachian Hardwood over in Bedford, Ohio, about a half hour from me. They were carrying 9/4 stock. There's 4/4 to an inch, so 9/4 would be 2 1/4 inches thick, primarily for the body blocks on the sides. It was thick enough they didn't have to add too many additional laminations or blocks to that. And I think the southwest, it's a lot more. They don't have basswood down there. It's native to Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Canada, New York, wherever. But it has to come from a hardwood lumber company. You won't find it in Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. Woodcraft carries some of it as well. So I don't know if that answers what they need to know or not, but I've had people say, geez, if you could send me a load down here to Texas or Florida or somewhere, well, you could do that. I don't know if the expense is worth it or not. It's hard to say. Basswood is typically, I think it's up to $354 a board foot. I usually buy a 300 or 400 board foot at a time, and it takes me a while to get through it because there's, you know, like Bob knows, you know, the carving he does and stuff. It's more time than materials involved in these things. You could have a 200 or 100 board feet of something, and it might take a couple of months to create a piece. I don't go through large volumes of it. If I can find it reasonable, I'll certainly buy it. Has to be kiln dried. That's a must. Otherwise, there was a Bob Curley in Cincinnati years ago. He used to carve horses out of poplar. He'd get rafters out of old barns, and they would start shifting on them. And we talked one day, and he says, "How come?" I said, "Because it's never been kiln dried. The wood can be 100 years old up in a barn until it's kiln dried. The kiln dries, shrinks the cells of the wood, so it keeps the wood from gaining the moisture content and keeps it from shifting and moving. It sometimes does shift and move, and it's going to do it if it wants to, but to eliminate and get down to 7, 8, or 6, 4, or 5% moisture content is very, very desirable. I've done some pieces with greenwood, and we've had some issues as a result. Most time, if it's not heavily laminated, it's not too bad. If it's coated, you know, and sealed up nicely too.
Somebody wants to know what's the difference in weight and size between the Disney horses and your average carousel horse.
Average carousel horse, you're probably the smaller ones, you're looking at 50, 60 pounds, maybe up to a possible 100 pounds for an outside row. And some of them are usually not even that heavy, maybe a tad more. The Disney horses are 250 pounds because they were the largest. I believe they're the largest carousel horses in the world. They were 7 foot long, 6.5 feet tall. I had a shop up in Burton, about 13, 14 miles north of me, where we produced these or carved these horses, created them, and had a feed scale in this old barn, part of where my shop was at. And as per Disney's request, we had these weighed on the feed scale, and they come out to 250 pounds. Basswood weighs approximately 1 pound per square foot. So do the math, we had almost 250 square feet of basswood into these creatures. And we had to weigh them so that Disney could engineer the carousel accordingly. Because you're looking at 5 rows of horses, and mine are 250 pounds. You get a 250 pounder or 250 pound person on top of that. So you're looking at close to 500 pounds per horse. And then you multiply that times rows of kids being 100 pounds, whatever, there's a whole lot of weight on there, a lot of tons of people. And so they engineered it accordingly, apparently.
The carousel horses that in Central Park, New York, weigh 200 pounds apiece. It's Stein
Yeah,
and
those-
Goldstein's.
Those are the biggest steins out there, I believe, what I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, they are.
Very impressive, yes.
But you mentioned Gray Tuttle. My first job on a carousel was 16. My first job, I was a ride operator on a Illions carousel, 3 abreast out here on Long Island. And when the Kiddie Park closed in 1971, Gray Tuttle bought all of the horses and actually sold most of them to Marion Stevens.
Yeah, Gray he had a collection of 300 or 400 animals down in Myrtle Beach. I did the armored Muller horse for him, one from Cedar Point, and then I did Denzel Rooster for him many, many years ago. And when I went down to visit him, there was 13, no less than 13 carousel lions in the house. I mean, it was unbelievable stuff that he had. I haven't heard from Gray in many, many moons. And Judy used to come to his wife, ex-wife, I guess, used to come to the conventions and such. But yeah, he's a voice out of the past. If you ever met Mel Gower, he was just a delightful individual from Oklahoma City, and he was one of the best. And he, unfortunately, cancer took him in his 40s. And but what a neat guy, great friend, big time collector out in Oklahoma.
Here's your reminder. Dog carts at the showroom.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
Didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it, please?
I think it was Siri.
Yeah, that was my ALEXA.
Oh, that was Bob. Okay.
That was in my living room. I'm surprised you could hear it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have another question from California. I came
Yes.
in a little bit late on presentation, but I wondered, have you ever made any horses for carousels, for merry-go-rounds around the country?
Well, yeah, most of mine have gone to private collectors. I did a 5-foot Lake Erie perch, which rides on a carousel up on Put-in Bay on the western basin of Lake Erie. And he has a little Disney worm in his mouth. But and then I did, there's a friend of mine in Yellow Springs has a Herschel mechanism, and he's was doing the Kissel's auctions and some others. So I did 2 Spillman type cats for him, and I did 2 zebras of the Herschel Spillman vintage. And the last piece that we did for him was a corgi carousel dog, and Liz painted it, and it came out so nice that he did not put it on a machine. He put it in this restaurant that they owned with a corgi theme. So those are about the only ones that I can recall I did for carousels. And then, like I said, Cedar Point has one of my fiberglass armored horses on the Kittyland carousel, which is a menagerie machine. There's rabbits and ostriches and, oh gosh, I can't remember what else, lion, tiger, deer, and giraffe, I think, and some other neat things on there. I've done some other menagerie pieces, but most of my pieces have gone to private collectors. The first carousel convention I went to was up in Madison, Wisconsin in 1980, and we toured the house on the rock, and it was still partially open at that point in time. And I thought I was going to really do a great, set the world on fire with my stuff. I had a giraffe, then I had a little cat and a rocking rabbit partially done. Well, back then, this huge showroom was loaded with carousel animals all the way around the room. And back then, a big Denso standard was selling for about $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, which people thought were outrageous at that time. And then years later, when prices went through the roof, or some of these horses were going for 40, 50, 60, 70,000, I started getting people calling me because they wanted a horse. And some of mine were going in the 20,000 range and upper and lower in that vicinity. And that's why I did those big Illions flowered horses. People came to a carousel auction, I think it was in Pennsylvania somewhere, and didn't see anything they like, and the prices were way up there. So they contacted me, and they commissioned me to do one of the flowered horses. And it was kind of neat because a lot of my customers I've never met, and we become friends over the phone. And most of my customers I consider friends. The big rewarding thing is when somebody's willing to spend that kind of money on one of your creations. That's an ultimate compliment, I think. And of course, you get the people that, the Rocking Rabbit, for example. I was at a show years ago, and this lady came up. The Rocking Rabbits were